Hello and welcome to the NOTstalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week we watched Pet Sematary. Ooh.
So,
yeah.
What's your history with Pet Sematary?
Very little. It's none. I mean, granted, that Ramon song, the titular song for the film, is kind of the only thing I know about it, apart from it being a Stephen King book. I kind of knew what it was about things coming back to life, but that was sort of it. I'd always intended to watch it, especially when the remake came out. I remember thinking I love John Lithgow, so him in a new scary reboot where he looks like not the villain, but he looks scary. I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'll watch it. Again, never did. So this is my first complete, fresh introduction to Pet Sematary in general. Yeah. How about you? Do you know anything about this? Did you know anything about this before?
I think I watched this at some point, but I don't remember it. It was the original, and it was pretty forgettable. Or I've seen parts of it, or I knew what it was about ish,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe I just watched Frankenweenie and thought that I watched this.
It's very similar.
Frankenweenie is the better take. But anyways, we won't get into that, I guess. You can listen to our other episode. But we had tried, so when we first started this pod, it was episode 10 or something. We were going to try to do this one. And I had watched the entire first movie and had to stop. And I said, hey, can we not do this? And it was because one of my favorite dogs in the world had just passed. And it was really hard. Luke dog is the greatest, and I baked him birthday cakes and everything. So it was it was a little bit too, even though it doesn't really have to do with church or the cat or anything, it was still I need a break from this.
Yeah, it's still pet death, which is hard. So 100%. Yeah,
totally.
I mean, again, that's part of my hesitation from getting into this. Where even though that's not any recent trauma that I'm experiencing, it's still just I don't know if I want to watch it yet.
Yeah.
But
we did it though.
We did.
This is, I've actually seen the first one twice now because I rewatched it.
Okay. Stan. Biggest fan in the world. Stephen King is shaking.
I didn't remember it. So I was okay, I guess I have to rewatch this. And then the new one, I didn't even realize there was a new one, but I also love John Lithgow. So I was okay, cool.
Okay, did you watch Dexter?
I did watch Dexter, but only up to season 2.
Okay, the Dexter heads in our fandom, let me make sure that I know exactly. I think it was season 4. Season 4. Okay, John Lithgow is a main in season 4 of Dexter. Dexter as a whole, some of it was interesting. I feel like most of it was not great, but I was watching every season up until the last. Season 4 is, I think, by far my favorite. He plays the main villain, and I have never seen better acting from him.
Really?
It was so chilling, and it's been so long. I watched it when it aired, which was 2007 or something. But he is so chilling, and there's a couple scenes where it's just it's wild. So I love John Lithgow, and I mean, obviously everything he's done, but when he was in Dexter, he was so good and so scary, and Jesus Christ, chilling, so good. And I loved that he was in this, and that was a big pull for me of getting or wanting to watch the remake.
Yeah, I will say that's what made me kind of excited to watch both of these movies. So the first one, we have Herman Munster, right?
Yeah.
Which, he is the quintessential, his voice is just so quintessentially burned into my brain.
Literally.
He's delightful. I love him. And then we have Tasha Yar from Star Trek The Next Generation. Before Worf was introduced as a security officer, it was Tasha, and she got killed in the worst fucking way. And I think it was something I think she wanted more money or more screen time or more development, and the writers were no, boom, and then they killed her in this shit. Really, it's pretty iconic how, and fucked up how she how she was killed. But I was like, cool, it's Tasha. And it was also so cool because she was a woman as the head of security, kicking ass. Like, so I was like,
Yeah.
fuck yeah.
She
And
was the mom?
she was the mom. Yeah.
Okay. See, because I know her from Dante's Peak.
I don't think I've seen Dante's
Okay. It
Peak.
was such a seminal piece of cinema for me growing up, being like a child. It's scary. It's just a doomsday movie. It was like around the same time as Armageddon.
There were like 3 other volcano movies at the
To-
same time too.
It was like Total Impact, Armageddon, Dante's Peak. Like, oh, there was this whole
There's like
slew,
another volcano one. Yeah, but like
a whole slew
yeah.
of catastrophe, disaster action movies. I mean, that one was just really sad because there's an iconic scene where like they're stuck at their cabin in the woods and the lake turns to acid because of the volcano. And in order to
you
like
know what? Maybe I did watch this.
in order to like save
She's
a
in
dog
that?
or something, the grandma ends up like wading into the water to like save them.
do
And you
remember this.
yeah, you
Oh
like
my
watch her
God.
dissolve in the acid as a means
Oh
of
my
self-sacrifice.
God.
Super terrifying and devastating. Very, very sad. But I believe she plays the mom in Dante's Peak.
Okay. I'm obsessed. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was like, so watching both of these, I was like, I love them. And that
Yeah.
was just kind of as far as it went. But we could get into that. Do you want to get into it? Should we just do
let's
it?
just go.
Okay.
I'm so on board.
At Ludlow, Maine, Dr. Creed and his family try to settle into their new home, which apparently includes a local pet cemetery. The family is greeted by old man Judd Crandall, who shows them around their property and gives them some information about the new town they live in. The next day, Lewis is at work when a dying student, Victor Pascal, is brought into his office. Though Lewis is unable to save him, the spirit of Pascal visits the doctor to warn him about crossing the deadfall barrier beyond the pet cemetery. Sometime later, his wife and children go visit family over the holiday, leaving Lewis alone with the family cat Winston Churchill, aka Church, who is immediately hit by a truck on the road bordering their house. Judd finds out and takes Lewis beyond the deadfall, deep into the forest, and has Lewis bury the cat at an indigenous burial ground and makes him swear not to tell a soul about what was done. The next day, Lewis wakes up to find Church back in the house, but is a little off having his gentle persona placed with a more vicious one.
A while later, the family is back together picnicking in their backyard when their son, Gage, wanders into the road and is killed by a truck. Things are messy. A fight breaks out at Gage's funeral. Lewis's wife and daughter go back to her parents' house, and Lewis is left alone contemplating burying his son in the indigenous burial ground. Judd tries to dissuade Lewis from doing it and blames himself for Lewis's current predicament. Even Pascal shows back up to discourage Lewis from his plans, but Lewis, delusional with grief, doesn't listen and digs up his son's body from the graveyard to rebury it at the burial grounds. That night, Gage returns home and kills Judd and Lewis's wife, who came back to check on him. Lewis wakes up, finds the bodies, kills Church, and eventually Gage. Then, because he didn't learn a goddamn thing, he buries his wife at the burial grounds and is subsequently killed by her. Yeah, legit.
Oh, you had something to say first.
Oh, yes. Okay, so just a second ago in the intro, I did say that she was in Dante's Peak. That is not true. She is in Deep Impact. But again, these movies all blended together in my mind. So one of the big catastrophe movies. Anyways, okay, so Pet Sematary.
So this movie was a goddamn mess. And it felt really disjointed. I really didn't like anybody. Nobody liked each other. But everything bad happens because men don't want to confront reality or their feelings or talk about things. Like, he literally buries the cat because he doesn't want to tell his daughter. He just can't tell his daughter. And Judd is the one that, says like, hey, let's do this, right? So like, this is just kind of like cyclical behavior or like, patriarchal values passed down. And literally it destroys everybody, which is a cool concept. And I like that high level. But watching this happen is just... It's not as well thought out or put together, I don't think, as it should have been.
As a whole, I 100%, I love the idea of the story. I love, because to me, it's like both films were sort of like, it's like a tale of the horrors of grief and regret. And a lot of that comes from like the lack of communication. And because we're seeing these patriarchal family structures, it's like on the men to not shed, but like take the brunt of the burden of trauma and of like whatever without communicating the realities of the world. And I think that is such like a gross male thing. Like, talk to your kids. Like, you need to be able to talk to your
Yeah.
children. You need to be able to talk to your wife. Like, there are so many times where it's like both of them are like, I'm feeling fucked up, and it's like, what's wrong? I don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Well, this
Well,
is like your
and
partner. Talk about what's going on. Like, I don't get why nobody's talking, and like it's just so annoying. But to me, that's the whole point, and it's really great to see because it's like grief is so hard, especially like I could not imagine losing a child. Grief is incredible. It's so psychosis inducing and like it's awful. It can be so so hard. And this is like when you try to do things alone and you try to like change the reality of these moments through the psychosis of grief, this is what happens. And I'm like, that's a cool story. I'm like, you need people. You need people you love. You need people you trust. You need people who care about you and who you care about to be there for you when life deals you the most impossible cards imaginable.
mm-hmm.
And this is like a cautionary tale of like, don't hold it in. Don't like try to change what it
Right.
like, just accept things as they are, go through the process of grief, but be around people who you can be vulnerable with. And this is like everybody being like, well, I can't talk about it. And it's like, what's her name talking about her sister, and like which is
Yes.
a whole thing that I really want to get into, but like she can't open up about it. She can't talk about it. She's like held on to all this, which I get is hard. But that's her whole thing, is like not being able to talk about it, not being able to talk about like being vulnerable with her husband about like, except when she's like near death, about like how there was some resentment in the fact that like they had to take care of her and all this. Like, I just
Like, yeah, everybody
communicate.
in this story has this intense amount of trauma and grief that they haven't resolved. So, like, Lewis and his family, their way of dealing with that to a certain extent is running away, right? So they
Yeah.
leave the big city to come here. And Lewis, in particular, is a person that, and I mean, everybody really doesn't want to try anything that, like, you know, they're not going to go to therapy, they're not going to try to talk about it or anything. They're literally going to try to do the thing that's the easiest, that like absolves them of guilt. There's a lot of moments where, like, you know, Judd is like, oh, this wasn't your fault, this wasn't your fault, right? But like Judd also has, like, from killing that guy, from like his dog, everything that happened, from like, you know, losing his wife, like he's literally what Lewis would become if he didn't die at the end, right? Where he's in this house that he's lived in literally his whole life, surrounded by, you know, all this memorabilia from his life before and what happened, and has literally nobody, no community, no friends, no nothing. He's just sitting there and rotting in his aloneness. But like, even when he tries to reach out to the family across the way, right? He's trying to like do that as like, I don't know. It's not really him helping himself. He's like, oh, I'm trying to help others, when he hasn't even dealt with his own grief and the things that have happened to him. So like, there's a lot of times where you go through something fucked up, you have to resolve it. You have to try. And if you don't, and you just start wildly telling people what to do, and do things that you did because, oh, maybe it'll turn out different. Maybe church won't be an asshole like my dog was, right? Then all you're doing is just ensuring the cycle continues, right? So, like, really, this is like a movie where the tagline should be everybody needs therapy.
Like
um
and 100% too, just like in terms of life is hard and things happen that are excruciating. Talk about it. Like, you're allowed to feel these ways. Like the way that Rachel cannot let this past with her sister go. It's fair because it was traumatic and it was hard. I mean, can you imagine growing up? Like, it's just an impossible situation. Like, just in terms of growing up, and now you have this like traumatic burden where you're like, I feel like a bad person because I wish she had died, but also like I wanted to be there for my sister, and I feel guilt about not being there for my sister every day, but simultaneously holding that space of like, God, if she had just died, my life would have been so easy. Those are
yes.
complex emotions. You're allowed to feel them, but she, girl, 30 years later, like, like, I don't know. And I know it's hard, but you gotta talk about stuff and forgive yourself and like communicate. Literally go to therapy. Like literally talk to somebody. It's so, to me, it is wild that this movie ultimately is just talk about your feelings. Literally talk about your feelings.
To me, one of the things I really didn't like Rachel as a character for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
One, just fundamentally, she's overprotective, she's disheveled, she's distrusting, she always apologizes for everything, she's not allowed to have an opinion, she's literally pleading like, hey, please come with us to Thanksgiving, like, I just want to be around you. And he's like, yeah, no. And there's like the other conversation where like first of all, fuck them for not fixing their cat and just letting him roam around. Fuck that. Fix your goddamn cats.
Yeah.
But then the dad is like, or Lewis is like, if this guy's like, because mom is like, oh, well, just tell her it's going to be fine. And he's like, okay, fine. But if this cat dies because his nuts get cut off, you're explaining it. And he's just like, got this, like, he's really anti this cat getting fixed. And I think that's some projecting of like, it'll make him less of a man, right? Like him projecting onto this cat. And again, mom is the bad guy because she's like, oh, get the cat fixed, right? Or, like, in every moment she's kind of seen as like incapable. I feel like there's never a moment where like, oh yeah, she's a good mom, oh, she's a good wife, oh, she has some fucking redeeming quality. Right? But especially when it comes to her sister, I really hated the depiction of the disability in this. I think it was really awful and grotesque. And they triple down on this whole narrative in the next one, which I fucking hate.
Which really bummed me out too, Jess.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of my least favorite tropes in horror films in general, like the grotesque visualization of a physical disability as something to be feared, as something to be afraid of. Like, what did her sister have? Do you remember?
Spinal meningitis.
Spinal meningitis.
Mm-hmm.
An awful thing to go through, but suddenly she's like, I can't even look at my sister. She's so ugly. It's like, stop. What do you like? Calm. And then just them showing us like, you can see her spine and she's like crawling. She's a monster. Like, I'm so bored of that. Like, it is such a belittling and like tone deaf thing. It's just like, and not even tone deaf. I need to stop saying that because I feel like that's also ableist language. But like, it's such a, it lacks any sort of empathy for the humanity of people going through these really tough things in a way that further subjugates them and emphasizes like that people with disabilities aren't people, that they are their disability, and that thing is something that you should be afraid of. And it's like, get over it.
We know
horror film, like, get the fuck
sister.
over this. Yeah, we know nothing.
We know
about
nothing
her.
other than she has spinal meningitis. She can't get out of bed, and everybody's afraid of her. And a lot of that too, like, and I know that she's like the family dirty secret because they don't talk about her, and they basically put her in the back room to die, right?
Yeah,
like, and which. All of this is fucking awful, fucking disgusting. But then, like, to further that by making it terrifying that she has this disability and that I'm afraid of her because she's a monster, like, it is one of the grossest things and the things that I hate the most when they do this in horror. And I was so fucking disappointed, and we'll talk about it in the next one, that in 2019 they decided this was not only a good thing to leave in there, but this was a good thing to make even more grotesque and awful.
And also to double down on the Zelda character a little bit, to make this character even more scary, they got into the fun gender thing of making the female presenting character be played by a male actor.
They?
Yeah, because Zelda, the sister, was played by an actor named Andrew Hubistek. And so it's to further emphasize the horror in like a really transphobic way, to be like, isn't she so gross because she sounds like a man? Like, it's tired. It's tired and it's messy, and let's stop. It's an old film, and I understand
fucking hate
that.
it.
But it's so boring and tired, and I have a huge problem.
I also
with that.
didn't understand what that added to the story, because Judd's trauma added to the story, right? Like, the dad Lewis had, like, he was just like overseeing dead people, I think, or like, the busyness of a Chicago ER, right?
Yeah,
like,
and being that kind of doctor is traumatic, and I understand that, like, the influx of so much death and violence, like it's gonna get to you. So
But
yes.
what did this add to it? And like literally, if you wanted her to have trauma, you could have done literally anything else. Like
Yeah.
literally. So I fucking hated this. I think out of this whole thing, I think the only good actor in this that I really liked was Ellie, and she was just crying most of the time, like because she was
Yeah.
worried about her cat, or she's asking these complex questions. And I like that she kept putting her parents on the spot, where she was like, what happens when you die? What happens here? Is my cat okay? I keep seeing this person called Pascal and he tells me something's not right. Can you tell me that everything's okay? Like, she's the one that's like probing and trying to like, she wants to accept things. She wants to just know and not be lied to, right? And her
Yeah.
parents are instead, again, like cyclical trauma and all that, are just like, oh yeah, nothing happened.
And it's just say it, like talk about it. I don't. It's just like I know that parents are trying to like keep their kids safe, but I think life is tough and some things are difficult to talk about, but like that's the burden of being a parent. That's part of it. Is like you will have to discuss these things with your kids and you should discuss them with your kids because
And you
that's the
should discuss them with
reality.
each other. You should discuss them
Yeah.
with people. And if they don't learn how to talk about this stuff with anybody, like, I mean, the parents are going to be a safe space, like, ideally the parents are a
Ideally.
safe person to talk to about this stuff, right? So like if they don't learn how to communicate about these hard things with their parents who are there to like help them find the language and to find their confidence in expressing themselves, then who? And like that's what we see with I mean obviously I keep wanting to call her Tasha Yar. Rachel's parents are fucking awful, and just go straight to abuse and name calling and putting people
And
down
the
and stuff, right?
literally the whole like I'm gonna fight your husband at the
At
funeral of
our
my
kid's
grandchild.
funeral.
What? Like you let him run in the street. It's like, well, to be also fair, I had so much like that whole scene. I'm like, oh, you mean the very easy street to walk onto where there's a big fucking red truck that keeps speeding past at 100 miles an hour? You're gonna have a picnic 50 feet away from that, and you're gonna fly a kite 50 feet away from that? Like, in my head, I'm like, oh, this is so dumb. Like, go into
Like,
the woods or go into find a meadow somewhere or go inside.
or you're a doctor, you have lots of money, and you've obviously been in this house for a good deal of time. Build a fence.
Build a fence. Literally build a
Build a
fence.
fence,
Keep your kids
But
safe. Build a fence at least just to that side of the road where like if they want to
yeah,
run out there, they're not going to like go around it. They're going to be like, "Oh, I can't get through this. Hey, mommy, daddy, can you help me get my ball or whatever?" Like,
right.
oh my god. It's just so it feels like these parents are so helpless and bad at being parents because they don't know how to be themselves. They don't know how to be there for each other and they don't know how to. And it's one of those things where like the restricting of information automatically imbues that information with a level of shame. So it's like they're so shameful and they're so like hurt and distraught and they're like, my life is so unique because I have these traumas. Babe, it's not unique. We all go through a lot of stuff, and that's not to diminish that, but you need to fucking talk about it, and you need to be able to talk about it so that way you can be a good communicator for your kids because they don't know. You're teaching them that it's bad to talk about stuff, and that is bad parenting. You fool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's also on the topic of this cyclical stuff. Like, so Judd, who's like supposed to be the one that's passing on the wisdom of this house and of this space and of what is here in their area, right? And the history of kind of the town or the spaces that they're inhabiting, right? The way that he talks about men and women really bothered me too, where he was saying like the iconic line the soil of a man's heart is stonier, and he kind of uses that to absolve them and to be like, oh well, we're just a little bit harder and we're a little bit rougher and it's harder to get down to us, right? And then when he talks about women, he says that they're good at keeping secrets and that they haven't seen into a man's heart, because men inherently just, keep everything private and shielded and hidden and rocky. And so that way nobody can kind of get in, or they hold these traumas, like you were saying, right? They're the ones that hold all the trauma or all the grief and everything. So that way they don't have to. But like, I don't understand where the women keeping secrets and then them not seeing into a man's heart where that intersects.
Because
And I don't like any of that language at all.
it's so boring, Jess. This, like, gender roles are so boring. They're so boring. Like, well, men are just this way and women, like, shut the fuck up. Do some work. Like, literally in what you just said, well, men are just this way, so I'm not going to try. Meanwhile, women should do the work to get to me because I'm just this way, but the women can change to make sure that they discover who I am because that's just me and you have to do the work for me. Men are so lazy, and that idea of like, I can't change because all men are this way, bullshit. It's boring and it's fake and it's a lie and it's silliness. It's silliness that you've been fed. It's silliness that you've been told. Unfortunately, that is the case. Do some work. Like, literally do any amount of work and understand that, like, no matter how you present in this world, you still have to, like, work on yourself to be a better person. Like, spend some time on learning shit. It's so, I agree with you. That language is so bogus. And in this, it was just like, ugh, whatever. Like, get out of my face. It's just, it's boring.
It's boring. It's regressive.
Yeah.
It's reinforcing things that like aren't even real.
Literally,
like,
oh my god. It's just, it is the fake reiteration of the binary and of gender roles, and
right. And I think
because of that,
also,
it's just harmful. Like
when he takes Lewis over the deadfall, right? And he's like telling him like, don't stop, don't look down, don't do this, like, it's because men can't think or look on their actions. They just have to fucking do it and not
blindly
look at where they're stepping or what they're doing, or they
don't
they
think
just can't
critically.
look at it.
Don't think critically and don't consider how you affect what's going on and what the things you're going to do.
Thank you.
Do it blindly because you have to, because you're a man and the man does this. This also dips into the conversation about the way that like indigenous, not lineage, but like indigenous lore plays into this movie, which I think there's a level of recklessness, especially coming from a white person and white people
100%.
in a story about whiteness, about like the lore of native, like ethereal concepts. But I do like, and I don't think this is intentional, I do like the idea of whiteness as a colonialist power and the way that it ignores the structures, procedures, and the sensitivity of indigenous cultures and indigenous traditions. Like, these white people are like, I found some dirt up there that'll bring people back to life, and it's like this indigenous land and we can just do it. It's like, okay, yeah, that's whiteness. Like, you're just, no one's there to stop you, and even if they were, you wouldn't stop.
Despite and they did warn you, right?
And
like,
they did warn you.
There have been warnings, but like,
despite
I mean,
the land literally being like, do not go here. We're going to try to stop you. This is bad. We're going to make this really scary. Don't go here. Don't do this. And they're like, we should do this, right? Like, nothing's telling us not to. It is, it's not funny, but it's just, it is an accurate representation of white colonialism as it stands in the sort of theft of what is now North America, in the way that our society treats, even to this day, Native individuals here. I think it's just, it is, that to me, that was my favorite part as an allegory for white colonialism. And again, I don't think that's intentional. I don't know Stephen King's intentions. I've done very little research on this because, again, this is my first time seeing this film, and I know it's based on his book, but I do think that there is a recklessness, especially in the idea of like magic, or in like
the mysticism of like non-white cultures. I think just in general has been like a movie trope for a long time,
and it's used so recklessly.
Yes.
And so to me, it's not a commentary on white colonialism. I mean, it literally is white colonialism at work, like in the establishment of the story, disregarding sort of Native tradition and like the reality of what some of these traditions were, not really looking into that, just using keywords and like being like, oh, an ancient burial ground. Okay. He stumbled accidentally, this movie stumbles accidentally into a really funny allegory for white colonialism. And that to
Mm-hmm.
me is the best part. Because it's like, yeah, of course. Like don't do that. Like leave that shit alone. Stay home. Don't go do that. Like you thinking that all of this land, everything that is here is for you, is the reason everyone died. Because you don't know how this works. It is not yours. You disregard everything about this. All the signs telling you don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. You're like, well, I can do this. You're a problem. And no offense, but you deserve what you get.
I mean, truly, right? Like
Yeah.
this movie, everything sucks.
Everything sucks.
I don't know how much more I can say about this because this movie also like wasn't really deep. It was pretty surface level on a lot of stuff, and I think that some of these
Yeah.
conversations that we're having are maybe reading into it a little bit, which like stories matter and whether intentional or unintentional, you know, the ideas and themes present in stories is important and impactful. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot more to say about this
I
made
have
for
just a
TV movie.
I just have a couple more notes. I love laundry shoots and I miss them.
Yes.
B, when he was getting in the tub, I legitimately thought that they were going to show a ball. They did not, but I thought they were.
He did not.
Love the incorporation of the truck driver singing the Ramones' Pet Sematary song.
Yes.
Love diegetic music in film, especially when it's like the titular song. He's driving by the Pet Cemetery singing like, I don't want to be buried in a pet. So it's just like, it's great. It's cute. I love it. I love the truck idea of just like that being a scary thing. It's in the next one too, and it's a
Yeah.
huge part of the story. Scary as fuck because that is so terrible. Like just that is a real idea of death. So scary. Car accidents, cars are insane. Big cars are so scary. And I love it. I love that part of this movie. Winner line of the film when she's calling him, she's at her parents' house in Chicago. She's calling him to be like, what's up? What are you doing? What's going on? Should I come back? And he's not answering. Her mom is like, he probably went out for a hamburger or a chicken dinner. You know how men are when they're alone. What? So good. Oh, you know how men are. He's probably out getting food. Like, it's like
you know how men are.
He went out for a hamburger or a chicken dinner. You know how men are. Love it. It's such shade. It's such a dig. Like it means nothing and it's so funny and it made me chuckle. So winner, as she said, chicken dinner. In Ludlow, Maine, Dr. Lewis Creed and his family try to settle into their new home, which apparently includes a local pet cemetery. The family is greeted by old man Judd Crandall, who shows them around their property and gives them some information about the new town they live in. The next day, Lewis is at work when dying student Victor Pascal is brought into his office. Though Lewis is unable to save him, the spirit of Pascal visits the doctor to warn him about crossing the deadfall barrier beyond the cemetery. Sometime later, his wife and children go to visit family over the holiday, leaving Lewis alone with the family cat Winston Churchill, aka Church, who is immediately hit by a truck on the road bordering their house. Judd finds out and takes Lewis beyond the deadfall, deep into the forest, and has Lewis bury the cat at an indigenous burial ground and makes him swear not to tell a soul about what he has done. The next day, Lewis wakes up to find Church back at the house, but is a little off, having his gentle persona replaced with a vicious one.
A while later, the family is celebrating their daughter Ellie's birthday, who wanders in the road when she sees Church and is also killed by a truck. Things are messy. Lewis's wife, Rachel, struggles with the loss of her daughter and guilt over killing her sister. Gage has visions of the very dead Pascal. Overall, it's a lot of turmoil. Rachel and Gage go back to their parents' house, and Lewis is left alone contemplating burying his daughter in the indigenous burial ground. Judd tries to dissuade Lewis from doing it and blames himself for Lewis's current predicament. Even Pascal shows up trying to discourage Lewis from his plans, but Lewis, delusional with grief, doesn't listen and digs up his daughter's body from the graveyard to rebury it at the burial grounds. That night, she returns home and everything is fine in a fucked up way until Rachel and Judd get involved. Ellie, feeling unaccepted, kills both of them, knocks out her dad, buries her mom in the burial ground, then comes back to kill dad and bury him. Then the whole family comes back for Gage, who was left alone in the car.
So they took some twists. They did some turns here.
Before we dig into all of the bad stuff about this, I do want to say that I felt like the film flowed a little bit better. It was much better connected. I liked that the family felt actually intimate, like they liked each other. I liked the introduction to the cemetery a lot better. The dinner scene, like everything felt a lot more natural. Dad even talking to the girl, talking to Ellie about death, and the whole like mom is like very religious, he's sciencey. Like I like that kind of tension that we're bringing in, even though I hate that fucking trope. Dad actually like showing weakness, I thought was cool, like not being afraid to do that. The dream sequences were way cooler. The Gage and Ellie swap was interesting. I think I liked that better. So a lot of the elements that string everything together, I think were much more intentional and really cool and made the story flow well.
Yeah.
However,
I completely agree. As a whole, I think it's a much more well-told film. I like it a lot more than the first one.
mm-hmm.
I love the swap. I love that we give voice to Ellie a little bit more. So it's not just like Gage comes back and he's a Chucky doll. It's like, what do you mean? I'm your daughter. I'm dancing around in the home. Like, I'm back. Like, him giving her a bath, terrifying.
Right.
Like, and he's
also,
like combing her hair, and then he sees the staples from the autopsy.
Fucking
Girl.
monster, how he brushes her hair. Like, I mean, even if she wasn't dead, that is absolutely incorrect and wrong, and I was screaming.
He's a bad dad. He's a bad dad. Yeah. But I think they got everything about like the conversation around like not being able to communicate and grief and like the struggle that it brings. Like, I think about the scene when his wife calls him while he's in the car, and she's like, can we just like talk about something? He's like, I'm really wiped out, honey. I can't talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Hangs up, cut to the shovel. He's out of the car, going to go dig up their child. The way he acts through that scene of like, he is not present. He is so pulled out of the reality of what's happening because of his grief. So fucking good. Like, I was so into it. I feel like they got all of that right. I feel like Church was way scarier in this.
Yeah.
Like, them just walking in and Church literally sitting on top of Gage in his crib. I was like, that's super scary. Church is so scary. I'm really into this. I feel like there was a lot done right here.
My favorite line for Church, with the subtitles on, because I watch everything with subtitles because I'm not a monster, was when the subtitles said "raged purring."
Yes,
it was so cute. Sorry.
Same.
That was one of my favorite moments of the film.
Yeah, that cat deserves an award. That cat was great. I still am really upset by the way they treated Zelda in this.
Because she was so much more a part of the movie, right? Like, before it was like, oh, well, my sister died and she, and I maybe, and in this one, she's a pivotal point of the story, to the point to where mom is like hearing her on the roof and in the walls. And then mom also kills Zelda, is the reason why Zelda died, because rather than, she was so afraid to go and just see her sister that she gave her food in the laundry chute, making her sister, who's bedridden, get out of bed to try to get her food to sustain herself and be alive. And then her sister literally fell down the laundry chute, or was it a laundry chute? Yeah, fell down. I think
it was like a dumbwaiter.
Yes, that's right. Fell down the dumbwaiter and died, just blood coming out of that thing. Like, fuck that.
So to me, I will say, I like that they made, in a story about trauma and in a story about regret and in a story about not being able to communicate and how that eats away at your soul, I think making her be the reason her sister died is so much more compelling.
True.
Because it's like, I'm literally the cause. It's not like we let her die. It's literally, I did something that caused her death. I catalyzed her death. That makes it so much more severe, and it makes the stakes so much higher. And that idea, obsessed with. But They literally turned her sister Zelda from a bad memory into a monster in the attic. Like by
Right.
making the sounds creaking, crawling, like she's literally a monster who's going to come and get you. The memory of her is this monstrous, grotesque thing to further enable the conversations around monstrifying people with disabilities and making people with disabilities scary, which is just gross. Like, it's the big no from the first one, and they literally tripled down on it. Like, what if we made her like contort like the girl from The Ring, and she comes down and she's like lifting the thing and like there's blood and she's like, I'm your sister. Like, stop. We really don't need it. Like, we can know that she killed her. That's enough. Like,
Yeah,
you don't have to make
absolutely.
the sister the monster. It's enough for us to know that she caused her sister's death. That is so traumatic and so scary and so sad. That is enough to get us to empathize with this mom.
And
Like,
again, the way that she views her sister as a child is, also how her parents view it too, right? Because they aren't being loving, they're not being, they're also terrified of her. Everybody's afraid of her just because she looks different, right? Because she has this disability and she's literally locked away in the attic, right? And I agree with you. I like that rather than maybe being absolved of like, her part or like, wanting her sister to die, like it was very intentional, like, no, your fear and inability to accept her as who she is what caused her death. You are directly responsible for this. And I also really liked that the fact that she didn't deal with it, right? Like, and so the mom in this story in general is just incredibly dismissive and projects her trauma onto everyone and everything else, where she can't see anybody else, she can't hear anybody else. She's just stuck there because, again, she hasn't tried to resolve it. She has this incredible guilt and everything, but she's still afraid of her sister and all of that too, right? And I think that is much more compelling and is really interesting, but I really don't think that there was a way to do this without dipping back into the body horror
be,
or into like the fear of disabled people, right? Like,
yeah,
and
the fear of people with disabilities in general. I mean, the world is already doing that. Like, the world every single day
in
is reminding
2019,
able-bodied folk and able people that those people with disabilities, are less than and are monsters. Like, our culture is designed to forget about them.
mm-hmm.
That's like, we're already being fed that. We
I
already
mean, look
know
at
this, and it's our
COVID. Look
job,
at how this is
literally.
treated now. Like, I mean, nobody
And it's
cares about anybody with disabilities in these spaces when they are still the most
literally,
vulnerable, and the whole world is moving on from this thing that will
yeah,
literally kill. Uh, Anyways,
100%. And it is a reminder every day, and it's something that, like, we have to actively remember and to engage with and to change. And this movie does not do its part in helping change that narrative when it knows it should, because to me, I like that the idea that she killed her sister, stakes high, great. But she does not see her sister as a person first.
mm-hmm.
She sees her sister as a monster. And so I understand in her memory, her sister is a monster, not a person. But I think the more compelling aspect would be, what if the sister's memory, when she's coming back to like haunt her via her internalized shame, is she is a person first and a disability second, because then
Right.
it reminds her that, like, I was a person and you never saw me as that. You're a bad sister. You're a bad person because you never saw me as your sister. You saw me as a burden, and you saw me as a disability. And I'm a person, and you never saw me as that. You're a bad person.
You killed a
And I hope
person, not a
you killed
monster.
you killed a person, not a monster. Like, that
Yeah.
would have been emotionally so much more compelling.
Instead,
Oh.
we got like, oh, you're gonna end up just like me.
Literally, like, oh, the fear you're going to be disabled, to like, what does that say? Like, what are you guys saying with that? That is so, like, showing her, watching her spine sort of like come out of her skin in the bed, like, haha, now you have the thing that, like, stop it. It's so ableist and so gross, and it's so like transparent. It's boring. It's boring as fuck. And I'm so, yeah, I hate it. I hate it so much because people are so smart and so creative. And I love smart, creative people. And there are so many ways to like see the humanity in these characters, which makes it more compelling. It makes it more compelling when you see the humanity and there were so many good ways to do this that were ignored because they're sticking to the, like, if you're already delineating from the original text, like the original material, you're already making choices like switching the brother and the sister, like you're already doing a lot.
These are good narrative choices too. I want to point that out.
Yes.
But like, I'm hesitant to say that I like this movie just because of how prevalent and how much they double down on like the, fear of disabled people in this
Yeah.
story.
It's a big struggle, and it's also why I'm a little hesitant to be like, this is a good movie, because I don't think it is, and it's largely for that reason.
It could have been.
It could have been good. It's just, and again, it's just a reminder that like people with disabilities are so tossed aside. They're so forgotten. They're disregarded by society every single day, and it's like, it's gross. It's just I mean, granted, it's a nice reminder to be like, oh yeah, like this is in the shit we consume. Like, even if we're not paying attention to it, it's like it's there, and it starts to become ingrained in us, and that's why people just ignore it. And it's also,
and
you just talk about stuff.
Part of the problem with this too, I think, is Lewis's reaction to her talking about this, and this is something that non-disabled people do too, right? Where they're like, "Oh yeah, I get how you're afraid. It's fine." He still says the line where he's like, "Your parents never should have left you alone with her," where it's like, why? All she has a disability and she just needed some help. That's it. So it's too much to ask because it's scary, or like I have a big problem with that. Like, again, he's trying to like absolve her of her guilt. It's like, oh well, she died because she deserved it, is basically what he said.
Yeah.
And that's, again, we're talking about like this group of people that is just left out of every conversation and is often the subject of these sort of fears, or like especially in horror. And that line really bothers me too, because her dad is a doctor. Like, I mean, Lewis is a doctor, right? He understands this is a medical condition. If anybody is sympathetic to someone with disabilities in the story, it should be Lewis. But instead, as a doctor, which, I don't think the story meant to do this, but I think this is really a good sort of theme, is like doctors also don't give a shit and think that they deserve to die. But the story didn't mean that. But that's what
But it's inherent bias, like. And that just, it reeks of the bias of a lack of empathy and a lack of seeing people with disabilities as people. And it came through accidentally. In the same way that the first one, there's the conversation about like white colonialism. Like, that's not intentional. But because of the bias of its creators, it's there. Similarly with this, these people do not care about people with disabilities. And so in the story, of course, some of the characters are going to be a little bit ableist because they're written by people who are also ableist.
You mean?
You know what I mean? Like, it's just going to happen because that's coming from the mind of somebody who does not see people with disabilities as people.
And like they even, get into it with like the maid, right, in both films, who we didn't talk about in the last one, where she has stomach issues, so much so that she's doubled over in pain, and she's like, well, I didn't marry a doctor, so, and he's like, I guess there's a line of like, well, I could look at that for you, which is, I don't think he really meant that in either film. But like, she's literally in so much pain. And because she's in America, she can't go to the doctor. She doesn't have that sort of access. And so she just has to live with this pain that has ultimately, like, from what we know of this character, stopped her from going anywhere, doing anything, having a life, having relationships, having personal relationships, right? She's just a person that has a medical problem that, society just wants to go away. She's a maid that nobody gives a shit about. And so when she kills herself, nobody cares. Nobody even really talks about it. It's just for the viewer. And like, so we're still talking about like, who do we see as people and who's deserving? And that's also,
it like quietly dips into like privatized healthcare and the experience of being a non-Native American and capitalism as it stands, and how like existing here without the privilege of having been born here is just so ostracizing, and in some cases a death sentence, because you can't receive help.
And in the same way,
cases,
this is not a commentary that they meant, right? I mean, this woman is literally doing their laundry and doing their chores for them, and they could care less about her. He's a doctor. He has drugs at home. Just give her some pain meds, like, I don't understand why that needed to be there, especially if like it wasn't such a big conversation, like, if it wasn't being intentional with what it's saying about, privatized healthcare or classism or, people with disabilities or anything like that. It's just there because why? It doesn't add to the story.
Yeah. It just, I mean, it just makes the other characters unlikable because, I mean, it shows their inhumanity, right? Like, it's just like, oh no. Okay, let's move on. Like,
Did she come?
I
She
don't
didn't
know.
even come back as like another spirit with Pascal, right?
Yeah.
Like, which also in this movie, Pascal is the only black person.
Yeah.
And literally, we
I mean,
see the first time we see him is when he's dying, almost
yeah.
basically dead. So cool.
Which
Okay.
was it's not a cute look. I know there's an intentionality behind casting black actors as opposed to an all white cast, which it was an all white cast with the exception of the one maimed victim. And the whole time we see him, his brain is like we're seeing the brutalized body of a black person the entire time. Which
Mm-hmm.
it's a horror movie and I understand that, but like come on. That's stupid. Like that's bad. That's not good. The more I talk about it, the more it's a bad movie. And it's a mess. I hated that. It's a joke.
To be so intentional with some of the story decisions that were made, and to be intentional in helping the fluidity and things like that. I mean, every marginalized group in this story, whether they're poor, non-white, or disabled, is just shit on. And like, I feel like this is a story that was written by white people and white able-bodied people
Yeah.
that didn't really think about anybody else and how this was being portrayed. Because again, there are some really cool things when we pull this out and when we're talking about, like you just had like an incredible idea, like where you could punch this up, right? Like bring in consultants if you're going to try to tell these stories or try to tell stories of marginalized people, like have them write it or at least have somebody be a part of the conversation.
And I know that like with a lot of these
Or don't
systems,
do it.
especially when making movies, there are so many eyes and so many hands and so many decisions being made, but like and I know that shit moves fast. So like maybe there's not a lot of time to like spend to like punch up or reconsider or rewrite whatever. But unfortunately you do have to spend a little bit more time than this. Like I'm sitting from a place of privilege, obviously having seen it, having not worked on it. I'm looking at it completely as a critic. But come on. Like you can't keep perpetuating these toxic stories, like these toxic tropes. Like I mean you can and it happens all the time, but it's so harmful. Like understand that this is going to be consumed by so many people and there are going to be people out there who see themselves in this and their takeaway is going to be like, "Oh, I'm not a person. Like I'm a
Mm-hmm.
monster. I'm bad." Like do you want that? Is that the whole thing? Because I feel like in horror, part of what makes horror so great oftentimes is like it is subversive. It is getting into the hard conversations via cinematic horror tropes. Like you're taking the concept of grief and you're making it a conversation about growth. And I mean, obviously it's going to be scary and bloody and whatever, but like that's the point of horror is that there's a lot of messaging in it that can be said through allegory. And if you're going to do this, be better at like having a foundational base of a story that you want to tell that is like meaningful and interesting and subverts the expectations that have already been bestowed on us by the world. Like that's the point. Like be subversive, be interesting, use person first language and like structures and ideas and like I mean that's way more compelling like because these people are bad. Like even going back to the conversation about communicating with your family, like another part of this movie that I thought was really interesting, Lewis doesn't want to talk about anything to anybody because he's a big, strong man and he's going to keep it inside and he's a big, strong guy, right? Um, Literally after his daughter is brought back to life, he's on the phone with her mom, his wife. She's like, "Does mommy know about me?" She's like begging. Like, and I know this is like the bad version of the daughter, but she's literally begging him to talk to his wife and to recognize her.
Mm-hmm.
And his response is, "I can't do this." She's begging you. She's begging you to talk. She's begging you to be vulnerable. She's begging you to confront your actions. She's begging you. And you say, "Oh, I can't do this." Yeah, okay, big strong man, big weak baby. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, that is so bogus. And it's intention, and that is a choice. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great choice to poke at this very crucial part of the story, this lack of communication. I'm like, yeah, cool, 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 cool. But then with the other stuff, it's like we couldn't give less of a shit about
Mm-hmm.
the people with disabilities and how we're making them monsters. We couldn't give less of a shit about the one black character in this movie who the only way that we see him is if he's brutalized on screen. We couldn't give less of a shit about anything else. I'm happy that this is being talked about, and I'm happy we're talking about toxic masculinity and the way that affects and inhibits proper vulnerable communication with your loved ones. Love that. Interested in that. But there's way more to do here, and you had the time to do it. And at every point, you could have subverted something or switched the like spun the trope a little bit, or had a bit of a pivot in conversation. You literally just leaned so hard into the problematic aspect of it that it's like, oh, okay, well, that was also a choice in the same way that you're choosing to discuss these pitfalls in communication. And so for that, I'm just like, well, fuck you. Like, fuck that. That's so silly and bad. And it just, the more I think about it, the more I struggle with it. Because again, some of it worked, some of the choices worked, most of them didn't, unfortunately.
And going back to what you said, where, disabled people or, any minority group will watch this and be like, well, I'm poor. I don't belong. I should just kill myself. Well, I'm disabled. I'm not a person. I don't belong, like, so for those people to watch this and to just be like, well, I don't have a place in this world. Right. And there's also just like the cis wet or cis het,
Cis wet.
able bodied, I know, cis wet. The cis het white able bodied middle class people that watch this to just reiterate all of the worldviews that they already have, which is disabled people are awful and not people and scary. And if you're poor, then you don't deserve to be alive. Like all this stuff. It's like, you're not challenging anybody here. All you're doing is just working to continue the normalization of these awful ideologies.
No, it's 100%, and that's why it's boring, because again, it's doing nothing but reiterating the status quo. And I do think the beauty with art and the beauty with storytelling is you have the ability to change the status quo with your fucking words. How cool is that? You can do that with your little brain, and you can go out and you can make stuff, and it can change people's minds, and that is the power and the beauty of storytelling and creative. That's the beauty of art. So I really struggle when things like you spend so much time and so much money and so much effort in creating something that its only goal, it seems, is to reestablish, to reinforce, and to reinstill the status quo. Why are we making it? Like, why? I obviously know why we're making it, because again, that's why we're doing this podcast. It's a nostalgic cash grab. There are remakes of everything. We understand this. We know. But even with that, I'm like, as an artist, and again, I know that there are probably better ideas that got shut out because the whole process is so laborious and so taxing and scary and changing at all times. I get it. But ultimately, it does become a product, this thing. And I feel like this thing, from a creative standpoint, from an artistic standpoint, in what it's trying to do, the message it's trying to convey, especially with its changes from the original, I feel like with all that, it did fail for me at almost every level.
Absolutely.
And it's unfortunate.
The little girl is like Ellie. I liked that in this, she's trying to get everybody to see that they're bad and that their choices are bad, right? And
I love
like
that.
I love that she called her mom out on like killing her sister, right? She is not fucking around, but she's the one that died because that sort of honesty or like curiosity doesn't belong in this world either, because you don't need the truth, or you don't need to challenge the status quo or these things that are being told to you. Like, so by her dying instead of Gage was very innocent, whatever, like I think it's almost more sinister that Ellie died because she was starting to find herself in the world and to ask these important questions and to try to get her parents to be honest, right, with their decisions, or what they've done, or, talk about like, what does heaven mean? What is, medically scientific stuff? What is change, but like,
You know what? I love that. That is so right. That is so correct. I love it because it makes it more sinister 100%. But yes, literally, she's like, I died because of your lack of communication. I died because you did not give me the tools to grow autonomously in this world as a person who like sees the humanity in people and sees the humanity in the world, because you guys tried to stifle the reality of the world. I died. And now I'm here to fuck your shit up because you guys don't deserve to live in this world either. Which, as an idea, I love
right.
it. Love. But, oh, God. And that's a struggle because that like everything is right there. It's like right there. Like these moments are like, oh, they're so there. And then we like, no, people with disabilities are monsters. You're like, okay, like, how about we don't do that?
I love when we go through these movies and we just like find way better ways to rewrite them. And I'm like, oh my God, Eric, we should just be a consulting team and we should just rewrite these scripts for people.
I want to work in this industry so bad. I want a writing job so bad. Okay. Legit though, if you're listening, like, go read my fucking scripts. But I really do want that. I want to be a part of it. Like I love the idea. I love breaking things down. I love writing things. I love creating because like it's so fun. And like you get to do whatever the fuck you want when it comes to these ideas, and the way that you're like the way that you can like communicate change through art. Oh my God. It's just so cool. It's so overwhelmingly cool to me. And that's why it just bums me out when like stuff like this gets so close to the point and so close to like a positive, momentous change in what they're trying to say, especially in a very beloved IP, in this nostalgic like cash grab. When they get so close to being like, wow, this is like exactly what this movie should have been. You guys did it, and it's so on for like the social the social conversation around all of these things. You guys nailed it. When you get that close, and then they were like, miss the point completely. It's so frustrating because you're like, no, like, you guys almost had it. You almost did it. But again, I'm just one person with one opinion. Like you are one person with one opinion, and I understand that that's not the case. But at least for me, that's how it felt.
Yeah,
they were so close to like really, really good moments, and they said whatever. I mean, even still, like the Achilles heel in the first one when Gage cuts the Achilles tendon. Scary as fuck. Achilles tendon horror is like one of my scariest. I saw Hostel one time and I was like, I can't do this. Cutting the Achilles tendon for some reason in my head is so much scarier than like any sort of maiming or like body horror stuff. That just cutting that, it makes my soul ache. Like the idea of cutting the Achilles tendon on somebody's Jess, it's like it is so scary to me. It is so terrifying. And in this one, obsessed, the misdirects when John Lithgow's in the room, and they're going to do the same scene where it's like she's under the bed. He like looks down at the bed. We see that she already has the scalpel. She's about to cut the shit out of that tendon. And then he just like kicks the bed and she's not there. You're like, oh, yes, misdirect. And then as he's going down the stairs, she's like, haha, gotcha. And then like from the staircase does it. And it was like every time, I'm not kidding, hand to screen, look away. Like I can view a lot of things because I understand that it's all fake. Like I get that. For some reason, the Achilles tendon, it's so scary to me. It's like the scariest thing, and I don't know why. Well, I know why. It's like it immobilizes you. Literally, will not be able to walk. So it's like an immediate immobilization of it, but also just like because the tendon is so tight in your leg that it's like gonna snap and like I don't know. It fucks me up.
Okay, we need to stop talking about this because now I'm thinking about that and I'm like, I can't do this. Any sort of like, I can't watch like
I'm
whenever.
so warm.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Anyways, so this movie surface level was more fluid, which was nice, and the characters were actually characters, but in our deep dive, I think that I think we did a good job on our deep dive. Just
I think so
saying.
too. I mean, my last note really is just the girl who played Ellie looks like a young Drew Barrymore, and she slayed.
She
She
did
really
great.
did a great job. I loved her in this. She was nice and scary.
I
She
also
was
liked
great.
the ending better, where she killed mom and then buried her. So she's recreating the family that she wants, right? We're talking about like change and recognition and all of this, and I
Yes.
really like that.
Same. And again, it goes back to like getting so close to it. The conversation about like what the family I deserve. And she's making that happen
Yes.
for herself. She doesn't want this version of her parents. She wants a version of her parents that's real. And to her, the reality of that is people who are willing to confront these issues head on, which she is very clearly displaying in these moments of communication or attempts to
Mm-hmm.
talk to her dad. Agreed. That ending, I liked it way more. And like them walking to the car with Gage still in it, and them like walking up to the car, and then Church jumping on the car, where it's like the whole family's dead now. And he's just
Right.
like, what? And it's sinister because it's like, oh, they're gonna kill him too, and it's like sad and scary, and like it is the right. It's good.
It
It
was
was a
the right
great
ending.
ending. It was the right
Yeah.
ending. Yeah.
Okay, so we're back from the Pet Cemetery. Eric,
Yeah.
the first one, who was it for?
Um, the Ramones. For the Ramones, 100%. They came in here and they slayed the day with that song. It's so good. I've never seen this movie, so like now listening to the lyrics, I'm like, of course the Ramones are gonna write the most basic shit. I don't wanna be buried in a pet cemetery. I don't wanna live my life again. I'm like, that's literally the plot of the movie. Congrats, Kings. Like you did it. But it's also a catchy fucking song. It
Yeah.
is one of my favorite Ramones songs. So to me, it was for the Ramones. Who do you think it was for?
I think it was for the cat that played church, because there's the moment where they're given an entire steak to like just chow down on. And I was like, you get it, cat. You get it, kitty. This is for you. Also, can I just say, I thought it was hilarious that anytime the cat was on, they had like that generic "Meow," like just the stock sound bite of a cat being mean, or like, I thought that was so funny.
It's
But
like the cat's Wilhelm scream.
yes. So that's who it was for.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that.
did you like it?
Um, truthfully, I like parts of it. I like the idea of it. I think I might like the book. Maybe I should like read the actual story from Stephen King because I like the premise. I love the concept. As a movie, not really. I honestly didn't really give a shit about it. It was like it was fine leaning bad, unfortunately. Because I did really want to like it. I like Stephen King. This is a classic, but with my present perspective, it was a little boring. What do you think? Did you like it?
No, it felt
Okay.
so boring. I
Yeah.
like could not give less of a shit about anybody in this movie, even though like
Yeah.
literally they had me like right away. I was like Herman Munster and Tasha Yar. Yes, let's do this. And then every scene and everything that happened was just bad. I really fucking hated Lewis, and he was like almost the only character in this, besides Jed, who was there. I don't know. I really didn't like this, and I will not watch it again
Yeah.
because it
Same.
was just really boring, and it felt just really disjointed. It felt very first pass.
It's big
Um,
whatevs.
yeah, and then like with Gage being like Chucky at the end, I was like, okay, like come and play with me, mommy.
Yeah, which it was like kind of funny because it's silly, but
It was
like
hilarious.
him jumping down from the attic like Chucky was so like yeah, like
Also,
okay,
him
that's
trying
funny.
to look scary was so cute. You could tell they were like, okay, be a big scary monster. And he was like, "Ugh." Like, so to
Well,
me, all those moments were really cute because it was just this like 2-year-old trying to be menacing.
and then when he like eventually dies too, I love he like gets hit with the syringe. He's like, oh shit, no, and you like
Just
watch him
lay
kind of
down, lay down.
like walk back, and he's like, oh damn it, you got me. Okay, I'm gonna go to bed. Obviously it's sad because he's dying, but he's already dead. but the acting of it was very like, "Aw, this guy, like this actor's so cute." Like he's just going for it. He's trying to
Like
be a
they
big
told
scary
him,
guy, and it's
"You're so sleepy. You
never
need
been
a nap
sleepier.
so bad. Like, so you're gonna walk over like the sleepiest little kid, and then you're just gonna like go to bed." And he's like,
Yeah,
"Okay, mommy."
yeah. He did. Yeah, it was very funny. That whole ending was so funny.
Yeah. What about the 2019 version? Was it new, interesting, or the same? Progressive, regressive? Where are you landing on
I
this?
I think it was new and interesting. Obviously new time wise. I think new in some of its ideas, and I thought like some of the changes they made were really interesting. Again, the ending I thought was much better. I thought the swap of the siblings for who gets killed. I thought that that was really interesting. It gave a little bit more autonomy and a little bit more insidious scene building with Ellie because she can communicate, she can talk, and like she was way scarier than Gage.
Totally.
Just 100%. She was great. So I thought that was new and interesting. As an idea, I think most of it was kind of just the same. Like nothing really changed, but the biggest change to me was the incredibly regressive doubling down on the conversation about disabilities and the way that it kind of just misses the entire point. So that's the biggest chunk. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I think the same thing. I think it was new and interesting, and like it was the same enough where it was the like, the same premise, but like the things that they changed were like really interesting and really cool up until it, got into the regressive things that they were doing with, Zelda, and with, just everything that we talked about. It felt like this movie could have been just, I mean, we just punched it up, like literally just fix these things and it would be great.
I mean,
But
and even if not great, it would be
it would
better.
be better,
Like,
right?
I'm sure we could, like, it could be an
It'd be less gross.
excellent movie. But yeah, there were already such like good primed ideas that
Also, I was
100%.
sad that those masks never came back that the kids were using and stuff. I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this. And
Yes.
then they talked about like the Wendigo, and like I was like, okay, like what are we doing? Like let's get into this. Are we gonna have like mythological creatures? Like cool. But none of that went anywhere. And instead they decided to use the screen time that could have been used on that to like, to go into just Zelda's disability.
Seeing those kids with the masks in the trailer, I was like, so scary, so cool. I love this. I'm so interested. One scene with the kids, then Ellie has the cat mask one other time, and that's it. And I was like, oh, that was so disappointing. And similarly, I mean, talk about like doubling down on whatever, bringing up the Wendigo just in terms of like native lore and native culture. The way that they were so reckless with like, yeah, it's this and that and whatever, and it's like we don't have to bring that into this.
We
Like
don't
it
have to do
doesn't.
it.
You're
Right.
already doing the messy burial ground situation, but now suddenly you're like, what's another native piece of culture that we can bastardize in this world? Like for what? Like that literally
Right.
never came back up apart from the shape shifting of the daughter, which I think that's the intention. That's what they're trying to say is like that's who she is.
Right.
But to me
Which
it's
then is
just
making indigenous culture the villain of
the villain.
the
Yeah.
film.
And so to me it's just another one of those things like don't even bring it up. Like why did we bring it up? It's not
Yes.
it's not crucial to the story. You're really just talking out of your ass because you don't know what this means. You don't know how it affects or is affiliated with this culture. So don't talk about it. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
again, it's just more cultural appropriation. We didn't even get into it, but I had a lot of feelings about it. As soon as he said that word, I was like, oh my God. Like, really? Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Problems. Problems.
I totally feel that. Who do you think this is for?
I'm going to say Starcrawler, the band who did the cover of Pet
Oh,
Sematary for this
yeah.
film, because it gave them the chance to do a cool, iconic cover for a cool, hopefully iconic film. Unfortunately, neither really hit. I'm not a big fan of the cover, but I think it was a great opportunity for them. Vibes. Who do you think it was for?
I think it was I'm gonna say it's for the artist that made the masks. because I feel like that artist maybe came in and was like, oh, cool, these are going to be a big part of the movie, like we were thinking, right? And they're like, this is going to be so sick. And then they just weren't. But I mean, those masks were one of the most interesting things about the film and probably like cost the most. Yeah, I liked them a lot. And I think that they should have been in there more.
Were so good. They were so good.
Did you like it?
When we came into this conversation, I did like it. Now, not really. Do I like it more than the first one? 100%. I want to like it really bad, but you know what? I'm gonna leave it on an eh. It's big to me. What did you like it?
Coming into this conversation, I was gonna be like, this isn't terrible. Like, this isn't bad. Like, other than like, you know, the glaring disabilities conversation. This is fine. This is more enjoyable. And I think that's another thing is I was just comparing it to the first one. So it wasn't like objectively, is this a good movie, or objectively, do I like this? But I was comparatively like, I like this so much better than the other one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that I liked it. I will not watch it again. I thought it was just kind of big eh.
I feel the same way.
Yeah. So that's where I stand. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, everybody. We really appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, and please follow us on all of our social media. We love to see you there, and it really helps us out.
OMG. Our artwork and music is by Eric Lefebvre. Our editing is by Danny Barkley. And thanks again for listening. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jess.
And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical. Goodbye. Bye. This podcast has been brought to you by the NOTstalgia Network.
Visit thenotStalgiaNetwork.com for more.
Hey everybody, I'm Eric.
I'm Shelby.
I'm Jake.
And we are the band Lousy Advice from the Lousy Advice Podcast.
Come listen as we draft artist and genre-centric best of lists.
With the help of our closest friends.
These lists are canon.
And there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it.
From Misfits to Cher.
Green Day to Gaga.
Or Pup to Paramore.
Listen to the Lousy Advice Podcast now, or else.
Stream us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the NOTstalgia Network, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget that we are the band Lousy Advice, and this is our podcast, the Lousy Advice Podcast.
The Lousy Advice Podcast?
The Lousy Advice Podcast. Podcast.